Hey, Composer Gloves here. This is the 13th video in the FM8 from the Ground Up tutorial series, and today we're going to be covering the Modulation Tab, or the Modulation Matrix, sounds cooler, in FM8. So to get to it, you go to your Experts, it's one of the tabs, click it, boom, you're there. And this is more for your MIDI controller assignments and things like that, but there are some other options that could be useful in sound design. They give you some LFOs and such. So this pitch bend, first you have this grid. And this grid is essentially the same as sort of your FM matrix over here. It works the same way. You click and drag, and the routing works the same way to send signals to other places. And also one other quick note on the envelope. I skipped this on the envelope tutorial. If you click this arrow, it gets rid of the modulation matrix, and you click it again to bring it back. Anyways, so that's how that, so when you click and drag, it works the same way. You click and it will immediately go over, forming a right angle to whatever you want. So you have this pitch up and pitch bend. This is your pitch bend up and down, and it has it right here up and down, and you see our pitch bend wheel move in order with that. And that's also another useful hint. You can move your parameters around using this on some of them, not on all of them. And I do not use this very much because I don't do that much live performance, but I'll tell you what I know. So pitch bend up and down, this sets the limit. These numbers are very important as it goes to the pitch envelope. So you have your envelopes or your operators here, and if you route something in here, you're affecting the amplitude essentially on these. Unless you route it to the pitch, then you're changing the pitch. If you route something, and now these are your sources. So you have your pitch bend wheel, so if you move it up or down, which is reflected here, your modulation, which would be right here, and then you have aftertouch. If you have aftertouch on your keyboard, breath, which has to do with a second MIDI controller. Haven't messed with this setting. If you know what breath does, drop it in the comments so that people can learn and know what that does, because I just never use a MIDI controller setup. Maybe one day I will use that. You have your controller 1 and 2, which is assigned, as we talked about in the MIDI, the third video in this series. You assign them here, controller 1, controller 2, and what they do. So this modulates that with the amplitude. So you can control the amplitude of this or the pitch. And then there's this in envelope. Now you might be wondering what this in envelope is. Don't freak out. It's not that hard. When you route a signal into FM8 using your in on your FM matrix, it comes with its own, it has to have a way to interpret the volume that's coming in, and this can essentially just modulate that volume. Then you have this LFO 1 and LFO 2. These are two separate LFOs which can be changed down here, and they can turn your values on and off as an LFO is assigned to do using this matrix. So let's give you a few quick examples. All the things mean the same. These numbers down here are very important. This sets the range of your pitch bend knob. So if you change, right now it goes up a half step and down a half step. But we could set that range to be much larger. We could make it go down 26 half steps. Or this is pitch bend up. You can make it go up that much. As you can see, it happens much more dramatically. And you could go down 99. And you can see you can only technically go down so far, so on the pitch range, depending on the note you select. So it goes away much faster if you select the lower note. But anyways, usually by default, it's set at -2, +2. I'm just going to not mess with changing that again. You have your, now these are all sensitive to your MIDI controller, but I've given you the information you need that if you want to link things, you now know how. And this just controls the amplitude. But the neat thing is this LFO, you can route them out without affecting it through a modulation. You also notice that your modulation is hooked up to, the LFO is hooked up to your pitch by default. Just double click it to get rid of that. And now your modulation wheel is free to mess with. But to show you that this works through amplitude, you could take your LFO 1 and you can route it into C. LFO, just real quick definition, is something that oscillates at slower than 20, below the threshold of human hearing, which would be 20 hertz. And so right now, operator F is coming out. And so let's hook up our LFO to operator F to change the amplitude. And you see down here, our amplitude is turning on and off. Now you can just straight turn it off. These are LFOs. We're using LFO1. So we come down here, LFO1. I just turned it off, so it's not on. Or you turn it on. And there you have it. So that could be a really important button if you're looking for that. You can also sync it so that your rate will be some variation of the tempo you're working at, similar to how in the arpeggiator you have this kind of matrix here to change it according to the tempo. It's kind of the same thing. It's a little bit different because the rate uses different fractions and things. But now it's relative to your tempo in your DAW. So that's what sync does. As you can see, it speeds up a little bit when I turn it on to fit the tempo. It's a very subtle change, but it could make a big difference if you're doing stuff that's very rhythmically important. You have a delay, which if you turn the delay way up, that means that your signal will come through dry, and then the LFO will come in and start affecting whatever you set it up to affect. Like so. And if you set things up to control, like your controller 1 and controller 2, and you're moving those things around, then that could be a really useful thing, because now you're not just affecting amplitude with the LFO, but you're affecting a whole bunch of things, because it's telling these controllers turn on, off, turn on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off. Okay. You can select the waveform you want your LFO to be, and that produces different effects. Key sync starts it. Again, it's the phase thing, starts it at the beginning, and then it goes through. If not, it's in free run mode, and it will start wherever you left the phase off. If you don't know what I'm talking about, actually, I gave a pretty complete description right there, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Go watch previous videos, though, if you want to know more in detail about that on the operators, the operator group 1. And then you have invert, flips it. Again, watch the operator, the group operator tutorial to see about that. Your rate selects the rate that your LFO oscillates at. And you have the delay, which we just talked about. Key scale and velocity scale are exactly the same as key scale and velocity scale on anything else, which they have just about everywhere. There's a velocity scale. Again, if you turn the key scale up, it'll turn on, it'll go faster for higher notes and slower for lower notes, as you can see. Turn it down. It's the same throughout your keyboard. Same with velocity, but I don't have a keyboard with velocity touch sensitivity hooked up, because it's, I want a better keyboard. I prefer the one I'm using right now. So that's the one I'm using. And then you have an LFO2, which is just a second LFO that you can do various things with. So there's a lot of options here for live performance and hooking things up and routing them just the way you want. You could essentially kind of make your own easy morph option here using the modulation matrix with your MIDI controller. So it's really customizable. And that's pretty much all there is to this. If you enjoy these tutorials, subscribe, like this video, drop a comment below about some preferred routing methods you have in this area. If you use it, I don't know anyone that uses it very much. So if you do, drop some knowledge, man, and have a blessed day.
Thank you.